Hi, welcome to Prime Recap. In 1945, with the downfall of Germany, a group of young soldiers are trapped in the neighboring country, and to win the right to return home, they will need to disarm thousands of landmines. Today we will recap the story of the 2015 movie, Land of Mine. With the end of World War II, Denmark started recruiting German soldiers to deactivate the landmines that they themselves had installed all along the west coast of the country. Upon seeing one of the soldiers carrying the Danish flag in his arms, Sergeant Karl becomes enraged and starts beating him up. Like all Danes, the man hates the Germans and does not feel the slightest compassion for them. After this episode of gratuitous violence, the sergeant moves on to his next assignment, to lead a group of young Germans who are to clear all the mines off the coast of Ringkøbing. Captain Ebbe Jensen is the first to welcome the German soldiers and explains that there are more than 2 million landmines scattered along the west coast of Denmark. If they were to return home, the German soldiers will have to deactivate all of them without being blown up. Therefore, they need to train before they actually start their mission to deactivate the mines. Helmut is the first to put his life at risk, but fortunately he is able to open the mine and deactivate it with some ease. Next it is the turn of Wilhelm who, despite being quite frightened, manages to successfully accomplish his mission. Ernst is next, and soon after his twin brother. All of them manage to get away unscathed, but the tension between the soldiers increases when the first one accidentally blows himself up while trying to deactivate a bomb. After training, a group of young men are sent to work with Sergeant Karl. When he sees the boys, the man orders them to form a line and report in. Immediately, the young men discover that their superior is a great executioner. As their official mission, the soldiers need to disarm 45,000 mines that are buried on that beach. When the place is completely safe and bomb-free, the soldiers can return home. If they can disarm 6 mines per hour without being blown up, in just 3 months they will have completed their goal and will be free. To make the young soldiers work easier, Sergeant Karl gives them a map that indicates exactly where each mine is. The boys crawl along the ground with a metal skewer that they use to locate the mines buried in the sand. When they find a bomb, the soldiers must dig it up and then defuse it. This is how they spend most of the day until sunset, which is when the young people gather at the fishing house to rest. At the end of the day, Wilhelm says that the place is not as bad as he imagined and asks what his colleagues will do when they go home. The boy claims that a friend of his father's has promised that he will hire him to be a mechanic in his store. Helmut tries to warn him about the possibility of not returning to Germany, but Sebastian orders him to stay out of it and says that he would love to be able to work as a mechanic alongside Wilhelm in the future. Since arriving at Ringkøbing, the young people have been without food. Werner spots Elizabeth, the farmer's daughter, while the girl is playing with a doll and realizes that she is eating a piece of bread. The boy then approaches the girl and asks her the name of the doll. Elizabeth tells him that her daughter has injured her leg and Werner helps her bandage it. He says that a good soldier must always be ready to help. At that moment, the girl's mother appears and Werner takes the opportunity to take the piece of bread without her noticing. The boy says goodbye to Elizabeth and goes to his twin brother so that they can share the food. Before going to sleep, Sergeant Karl uses a piece of wood to trap the soldiers inside the dormitory to prevent them from escaping during the night. Day after day, they continue working hard to finish collecting the bombs. Ludwig is starving, having not eaten for 48 hours, and asks Sebastian to go and talk to the sergeant. Later, the young man goes to Karl's quarters and reveals that his colleagues are weak due to lack of food. However, Karl claims not to care about their welfare and orders the boy to go to sleep, as he doesn't know when the food will arrive. That night, Helmut is desperately hungry and decides to sneak out to find something to eat. The next morning, Ernst begins to feel ill and Werner asks the sergeant to give his brother a rest. Karl checks that the boy is pale and has a fever, but still orders him back to work. So Werner takes over from his brother and starts working twice as hard to keep up with the demands of both of them. Suddenly, Wilhelm also begins to feel ill and throws everything out on top of a mine. At that moment, the bomb explodes and Sebastian runs to help his partner. When he finds him, the boy discovers that Wilhelm has lost his arms. The young man begins to cry, saying he wants to go home, and Sebastian asks his colleagues to help him get him off the beach. Werner begins to scream for help from the sergeant, and Karl applies a sedative to the boy. He then puts him in a vehicle to be taken to the infirmary. Hours later, all the soldiers begin to feel ill and throw everything out. The sergeant asks what is going on and Helmut takes the blame for the situation. He tells her that he stole some feed from the farm the night before and that is why everyone got sick. Upon hearing this, Karl asks the farmer to take him to the barn and discovers that there was rat droppings mixed in with the feed. In this situation, the sergeant asks Sebastian to fetch seawater and orders the soldiers to drink it to force them to clean out their stomachs. In this way, they are able to expel the rat excrement they have ingested. Next, Karl allows the soldiers to take a shower and goes to rest next to Otto, his dog. Before going to sleep, Sebastian builds a tool and shows the sergeant that with that invention, it becomes easier to find the buried mines. The boy then reminds them that the beach needs to be free of mines in the next few weeks, but that won't happen if the soldiers starve to death. After hearing the boy's questioning, Carl orders him to go to sleep and locks the door of the fishing house as usual. The next morning, he takes his vehicle and drives to the nearest town to visit Wilhelm. However, the nurse gives him unexpected news: the boy could not recover and died the night before. Shaken by the news, the sergeant decides to bring food to the soldiers, who are positively surprised to find that they will have a decent breakfast that day. Sebastian prepares a potato soup and divides the bread among all his colleagues. When Carl approaches, everyone stands up to greet him and the man reveals that he has some good news and some bad news. The good news is that Wilhelm is recovering and will soon be sent home. Upon hearing this, everyone feels relieved, except Sebastian, who already suspects that the sergeant is lying. The bad news is that week, they will have to disarm 8 mines per hour to make up for the late work. Carl orders his men to finish eating in order to start the job. With Sebastian's new invention, the soldiers detect the mines at a much faster speed and are able to accomplish their goal. During the work, the boys talk about what they will do when they get to Germany, and the twins tell them that they will save a lot of money working as bricklayers in the reconstruction of their country. That day, Ludwig, who is responsible for counting the mines, reveals to the sergeant that he and his colleagues have managed to defuse 60 bombs. After work, the twins play with a beetle on the lawn and try to find a name for it. The two brothers love all kinds of animals and believe that all living beings deserve to be respected. Before sunset, the sergeant orders them to go to bed. However, in the middle of the night, he hears a noise coming from the fishing house and goes there to find out what is going on. At this time, the man discovers that Captain Ebbe was there with his Danish soldiers for the purpose of humiliating and subduing the young Germans. Seeing the boys in trouble, Carl decides to interfere and orders the soldiers to leave them alone because he needs those boys to fulfill his mission to clean up the beach. Sebastian helps Ludwig to his feet and the sergeant orders the boy to go wash himself, since he is covered in excrement. Before Ebbe leaves, Carl questions why the captain is going there to harass his team. The man then reveals that he saw the sergeant picking up food for the young Germans, but Carl claims that he picked up just enough for him and his dog. Finally, before Ebbe leaves, the sergeant asks if he can help get experienced men to work in his unit, and the captain assures him that he will recruit new people. The further the soldiers advance towards the beach, the more dangerous the mines become. While defusing a bomb, Sebastian discovers that there are double mines laid in that area, one on top of the other. At that moment he shouts to alert his colleagues and everyone stops their work. However, Werner was too far away to hear him and Ernst tries to warn his brother. However, by the time Werner is able to hear him, it is too late and the boy ends up blowing himself up. His twin brother runs to try to help him, but with the explosion Werner's body is already ashes. Ludwig tries to calm his friend down, and Carl appears soon after. When he realizes what has just happened, the sergeant asks his men to take Ernst to the fishing house and applies a sedative to get the boy to sleep. He then orders the soldiers back to work while he tries to console the boy who has just lost his brother. Even sedated, Ernst still insists on going to find Werner and says he can't sleep until he knows he is safe. The young man says that if the sergeant had really known Werner, he would have helped save him. Upon hearing this, Carl becomes emotional and stays by Ernst's side until the boy falls asleep. Sebastian is very shaken by the death of his friend, so the sergeant sits down next to him and decides to tell him the truth about Wilhelm. He tells that he lied about the boy recovering, and Sebastian claims that he already knew the young man was dead. However, according to him, the sergeant did the right thing by lying, because this way the soldiers were able to continue with the beach cleanup so that one day, maybe, they could go home. Before going to bed, Sebastian goes for a swim in the sea, and that night, unlike all the others, Carl decides not to lock the youngsters in the dormitory. In the days following the accident, the sergeant gets closer and closer to the boys, and after working hours they gather to play together. During the game, 2 new German soldiers are sent by Captain Ebbe to work in that unit, and Ludwig invites them to join the game. Meanwhile, Ernst walks alone through the farm. Instead of playing with his colleagues, the boy prefers to hunt the most different kinds of animals, as he used to do with his brother. This time, he finds a small mouse walking on the grass and decides to take it to his dormitory. The soldiers race on the safe part of the beach and Helmut is the winner. After celebrating their victory, the young men walk back to the farm next to the sergeant. Carl throws the ball for Otto to catch, and suddenly everyone hears an explosion. The dog had found a mine and ended up dying after accidentally triggering the bomb. The sergeant runs to his dog and laments his death. Carl is furious, as he considered Otto his best friend. The man then decides to punish Ludwig, who was the soldier responsible for counting the mines. However, Ludwig assures that he has accounted for all the mines correctly. According to the map, there were 1,200 mines buried, and all of them have been deactivated. Overcome with hatred, Carl throws the ball away and orders Ludwig to catch the object with his mouth, without using his hands. He then makes him bark like a dog. The sergeant claims that he was very good to those Germans and they took advantage of his generosity. From now on, they will have to walk in a line under every inch of the beach to make sure that there are no lost mines in that location. Helmut speaks up and says that this is much worse than shooting them in the head, because then they will be afraid of death the whole time. Upon hearing this, Carl begins to slap the boy several times across the face. Apparently, the man is back to being the same executioner he was when he met those boys. On the sergeant's orders, the soldiers start marching through the cleared fields and risk their own lives to make sure they have deactivated all the bombs in the place. As they walk, they are followed by 2 armed Danish soldiers, who have orders to shoot anyone who tries to escape. After the job, Helmut tries to convince his colleagues to flee, before they all end up dead. However, Sebastian is determined to stay and finish his mission, so they can go home safely. Still, Helmut would rather risk his life on the run than continue with that death march. However, if he runs away, his colleagues will be in danger, as Carl can blame them for allowing this to happen. So, before the boy could leave the fishing house, Sebastian orders his colleagues to tie him up. Helmut tries to resist, but when he realizes that he is unable to leave by force, he decides to give up his plan. Ernst observes the whole scene with his apathetic countenance and with the mouse on his lap, trapped in a cage. Since his twin brother died, the boy no longer shows any emotion and has even stopped caring about his own life. The next morning, the farmer shows up at the soldiers' dormitory. She is desperate for help because her daughter is on the beach in the middle of the minefield. Elizabeth has gone there to play with her doll and has no idea how much danger she is in. While Sebastian digs for mines to get to the girl, Sergeant Carl shows up at the fishing house and only finds Ernst inside. The man suspects that the other boys have run away, but Ernst informs him that they have gone to the beach. Upon arriving there, Carl realizes the situation and tries to calm the girl's mother. Just then, Ernst gets up and walks quietly to the beach. He enters the minefield and approaches Elizabeth. Meanwhile, Sebastian continues to carefully disarm the mines to clear the way to them. During the conversation, Ernst recalls the day the girl met Werner. The boy says that he would do anything for his brother and states that it has been very hard without him. When Sebastian finally catches up with them, he picks up Elizabeth and hands the girl over to her mother. He then calls his friend to get out of that place, but Ernst has already given up on living. The emptiness inside him is so great that the boy just begins to walk under the minefield until he triggers a bomb and has his body disintegrated. Sebastian is the one who suffers the most from this loss, and the sergeant tries hard to cheer him up, saying that very soon it will all be over and he will go home. Days later, some soldiers are searching for the last bombs while their colleagues gather the deactivated mines in a truck and share their plans for when they are in Germany. For them, freedom was closer than ever and the boys can't wait to eat their mother's food again. However, this dream is interrupted when, unexpectedly, one of the mines is triggered and all the others explode next. Sebastian and the other 3 soldiers who were on the beach run to find out what has happened and the sergeant appears soon after. Out of 14 young men, only 4 survived to complete the mission. The next day, they are finally put on the truck that will take them home after clearing all 45,000 mines from the beach. Soon after, Carl is summoned to Captain Ebba's office. The man informs him that he needs experienced soldiers to disarm the mines in Scaligen, but the sergeant informs him that he still has a lot of work to do in that town. However, Ebba claims that he is not referring to Carl, but to the 4 young men in his battalion who survived. Instead of sending them home, the captain sent them on a new mission. According to him, all German soldiers must remain in Denmark until all mines are deactivated. However, Carl wishes to keep his promise to send his soldiers home and asks Ebba to release the boys, otherwise they will end up dying. Still, the captain is determined not to go back on his decision and Carl decides to act on his own. While the boys are forced to search for German mines on Scaligen Beach, the sergeant sends a truck to pick up the 4 young men and take them back to their home country. When they reach their destination, they are met by Carl. The man informs them that the group is 500 meters away from the German border and orders the young men to run through the forest. As he approaches home, Sebastian looks back. The young man knows he will never see the sergeant again, but feels deep gratitude that he saved his life. So, what did you think of this movie? Let us know in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like it and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.